out a bunch of weird movies. I mean, they take so many weird steps in so many odd directions that aside from commercial intent, what the hell are these Amazing Spider-Man movies trying to say? If only someone would help me understand.
On a surface level, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is an in-your-face CGI montage of studio-commissioned gimmicks in an effort to franchise this character.
Everything you need is already at Oscorp.
Not to mention Avi Arad, Roberto Orci, and Alex Kurtzman.
But you can't franchise humanity. By peeling back its layers, this film is a goldmine of a story of human connection, loss, and redemption.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do agree, every cultural text, including ones where there's a scene where electricity closes a gap in a guy's tooth, can innately touch upon something poignant. It's just a matter of looking at it with the right angle to unlock everything. So, do you mind if I join you on this journey? Because I'm curious about these movies.
Well, in that case, welcome to the Thought Theater.
I have cramps.
Oh.
Peter Parker struggles with making connections with people. From the very beginning of this film and the film series as a whole, he is enveloped by abandonment.
You good?
As a mere child, his parents leave him for reasons he can't understand, only to die moments later. There is an unspoken connection between Peter Parker and his father, and losing that connection caused him to become closed off to social interaction. Then, of course, we have the iconic Uncle Ben death, causing him to lose the only sense of a father figure he had left.
Oh God.
In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it is later revealed that Peter's best friend Harry Osborn left New York as a young boy. These events lead Peter to have foundational issues in his persona that bleed into his interactions with people in the outside world.
Did you humiliate that boy?
You could say this interpretation of Peter Parker suffers from homesickness, where he's normalized a level of distress from loneliness. He doesn't pursue building a community or a network of friends because when you're with people, your identity is reflected back to you.
Hey, Parker, come on, get a picture. Come on.
Your self-image is subject to social interactions. As ERVING GOFFMAN once said, life itself is a dramatically enacted thing. But when his parents leave, his reflection from the door window is his self-image, frozen in time in his mind.
So when he seems to like taking stalker pictures of Gwen, he's too hurt to approach her in person, so he admires her from a distance. Peter comes across as an arrogant jerk, but only because being open with people means allowing some semblance of vulnerability, so the mask of toughness is what he uses to cover that. All of this is why the identity of Spider-Man is so important.
Gwen also unavoidably holds a reflection to him. She's an individual who also sits alone and stands up for her own moral values, much like he does. She's cut from the same cloth because she's embraced the sovereignty of her identity. When he looks through the lens of the camera at her, it's like looking to a reflection from when he was younger. But this time there's a romantic force because there's a new harmony that he's never really encountered.
And for a moment, it allows him to drop the weight of his past and become the support for others.
Oh God. Thank God. My son. My son.
It's almost self-therapeutic in a sense because Peter Parker believes that if he couldn't have a hero, have a father figure, or have someone to help carry the weight, then he can be that for someone else, and by doing that, become a hero for himself.
He's also a good-looking guy, so that helps.
I have no shame admitting that Andrew Garfield is my man crush. Good night, that man is a treasure. That was really dumb. Throughout the duration of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter has visions of Gwen's dead father, the man he failed to save.
Look out, it's a Dennis Leary ghost.
Her dad had the chance to be the one father figure in his life he wouldn't lose.
Captain Stacy is the embodiment of the painful duality between great power and great responsibility because his death comes from the consequences of his commitment to his values.
Oh, my love.
He's not alone.
He had a shotgun and there was a lizard man, and the kid that his daughter likes is trying to save the city. The only moral act was to help him despite how limited his own power was. And when he tells Peter Parker to keep Gwen safe, it imbues Peter with the same level of convictions that are needed for his maturity. Once again, Peter Parker sees himself reflected back to him in this moment. Everything he can be in the eyes of a dying man, who's shining due to his great beliefs. Peter Parker's failure to develop his self-image is because he still thinks of himself as a little boy, reflected back to him from the door window. So of course, when pushed, he'll return to Gwen. His soul is tied in a knot, effectively.
This internal conflict between Peter Parker and Spider-Man comes to a climax when Gwen decides to break up with Peter. She can't love a man who simultaneously wants to give her his all while also feeling forced to disconnect simply by being with her.
Wow. You have done this to me.
When Peter begins seeking out Gwen again, it acts as a turning point in his development because, at this point, he has decided that no longer will he allow Spider-Man and Peter Parker to war against each other.
Sorry.
In a sense, he's marrying himself to his alternate identity. This is beautifully characterized in the exchange between Peter and Gwen on the bridge. Peter Parker stands in his Spider-Man costume with Gwen, his mask off, as he professes his love and devotion to her, promising to follow her wherever she goes.
I'm just gonna follow you everywhere.
In the epic final battle, Spider-Man feels caught in the middle between Electro, a man he inspired because of his humanity turned villain, and Harry Osborn, a friend of Peter Parker's slowly disintegrating into madness because of the lack of humanity from Spider-Man. Ultimately, Spider-Man fails. The sins of Spider-Man and Peter Parker hang in the air over a broken man, holding the consequence of his choices in his arms.
No, please, please.
Well, I think this is also the most unflattering consequence and oddly human aspect of the character. He screws up and he has to live with his mistake. He got arrogant, he got overly occupied with the past, and his sloppy actions in the present kills the one thing that reflected a flattering idea of himself. It makes this Spider-Man look kinda incompetent and borderline unlikable for a lot of people, but in this movie that has like 5 storylines going on at once, this is the cohesive artistic risk that gives the whole work a holistic emotional feel. Loss.
Failure is not when someone falls, it's when they refuse to rise again. This characteristic, despite the many tragedies throughout the history of Spider-Man, has embodied the dexterity of Peter Parker's heart. He truly is a broken man doing his part to fix a broken world, but in some deep part of his soul, he is keeping himself together. I think that's what makes the character of Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 beautiful. His heroism is enlivened through the ability to fight for the greater good despite falling again and again and again.
Because even if we fall short, what
better way is there to live? Reminded Peter that Spider-Man is hope, and that the only way to keep hope alive is to get back up again and again and again. There was a scene that was cut from this movie that absolutely tears me up inside. I know Sony was pushing to franchise the Sinister Six, and thus wasn't quite ready to wrap up his story, but this moment brought a lot of necessary things to a close.
You're not my father.
I am your father, Peter. I want you just to listen to me.
My father is dead.
Following this, he embraces his father and they talk for a while, Richard Parker giving Peter advice on loss.
I don't know how to go on without her.
You don't. You take her with you.
So the moment when Peter dons the mask of Spider-Man once again, he is bringing with him all the tears, the joys, the pains, and the lives of the people he loved and lost with him, making him truly the Amazing Spider-Man.
I don't think I liked it that much, but I think it was alright. I do wish his dad, who looked like he came from Jumanji, appeared, because it would, for a lot of people, including myself, give a solid justification for this interpretation of Spider-Man. Because Peter Parker in this universe is defined by a lonely reflection of himself. So what happens when the meaning of that reflection is held into question? That would really put some fire under what the mask means to him, and in the memory of Gwen.
I wish we could see what this would have looked like without studio interference, and I think that's why I like the movie though, is because I really think it does try to tell a good emotional Spider-Man story. Humanity. A simple universal concept experienced by every human being to ever exist, yet somehow it is one of the hardest elements of human dynamic storytelling to get right. In order for a superhero to be anything more than muscle and a cape, they have to be able to connect with people at a base level. This is why Spider-Man is the most popular superhero of all time.
He's a character that shows the unflattering struggle that exists on the other side of the romance, where the ideals of responsibility and value isn't something concrete and fully achievable. Instead, it's awkward and filled with struggles, which shows as much human weakness as much human strength. A special thank you for the Thought Theater. This is my first ever collaboration and he totally made it happen. Not to mention he wrote most of this essay, so if you enjoyed this, why aren't you on this channel?
Out of the 3 live-action renditions of this character, I believe only one of them embodies the humanity of Peter Parker and Spider-Man more than any other, Andrew Garfield. A controversial pick, I know.
I think Andrew Garfield has a distractingly long neck, but aside from that, I think he's alright, I guess.